time I'm going to be talking about the neutral cards that are available in this new adventure. First up, we're going to be starting with the legendary cards. And on that list first, we have the Curator. It's a 7 mana minion, it's got Taunt, it's for 4/6 stats, and it has Battle Cry, draw a Beast, Dragon, and a Murloc from your deck. Wow, summon 3 minions for free, essentially. The problem is this has pretty low stats. It's 7 mana still, kind of like Emperor Veclor. Yeah, not really seeing this as that great from that perspective. The summoning capabilities are pretty insane. Obviously, if you try to build a deck like this, I think that you're going to look for one of two things. You might just want to focus on one, maybe two of the archetypes. I don't know if that's really possible to incorporate that much, but one or two, so that way you can get multiple summons. Or I think more likely what you want to do is you want to have this in your deck, and you want to just include one beast, one dragon, and maybe one Murloc. I honestly don't really see the Murloc side as being that worth it, because typically Murlocs synergize with each other. So, but the beast and dragon isn't that bad. So you have one beast, one or two big dragons, and then this guy just brings them out for free. So you've got a small army on the board, assuming that you didn't already draw them into your hand. That's kind of what I'm seeing from this card. Next up is Barnes. Summon a 1/1 copy of a random minion in your deck. 3/4 for 4 mana, not that bad of stats. Summon a 1/1 copy of a random minion. So actually, I think that's pretty good. If you can have a lot of minions that have general effects in your deck, let's just say you have a Ragnaros. If this thing hits a Ragnaros on turn 4, even if it's 1 mana, you're doing 8 damage to something. Your opponent has to use something to clear it, even if it's just a ping. That means on their turn 4 or their turn 5, they have to use a ping to kill your 1/1 Ragnaros. If you play this later in the game and you also get that 1/1 Ragnaros, you have probably some options where you can buff it or just play other threats with that. So no matter what, I think this card proposes really interesting qualities to the game. You can run it with N'Zoth and just summon a 1/1 of any Death Rattle minion, and you get some great value out of that. Pretty much anything, really, because the Death Rattle effect is going to go off, and you'll summon it when the N'Zoth comes around. Rose. Stealth. At the end of your turn, summon a 1/1 Steward. Interesting for anti-aggro. I like the direction of low mana cost legendaries that this card is showing. The problem is he's a 1/1, and I get that because he has stealth, he kind of needs to be a low static creature, so any AoE will eliminate him. But at the same time, I just don't really see him being that strong. He's not going to totally save you from aggro, because in the end, he's only summoning minions that have 1 attack. Maybe if he lived just tons of turns and you could get infinite value off of him, then it'd be worth it. But starting at turn 3 and you play this guy, it seems average, and if you played him later in the game, it seems worthless. Prince Malchezaar. Fun card, yeah. A 5 mana, 5/6, decent stats, not bad. Put 5 extra legendaries into your deck. A whole lot of extra RNG. Obviously, risky to play in a Reno style deck because you could just bust your chances of ever playing your Reno. But he's definitely a fun card, definitely fun to play in a deck you're expecting to be control and you want to get extra value. But I think for the most part, people would agree that you want the quality of cards that you know are in your deck, as opposed to just putting more randomness into your deck. If you can put randomness directly into your hand via the effect of some monster or with Discover or something else, that's pretty good, because you can know what the card is and you can play it whenever you want. But this puts him into your deck, and you really don't want to draw that Lorewalker Cho on turn 7 when you need a Flame Strike. Next up, we have Medivh, the Guardian. Equip Staff of Atish. Staff of Atish is here as well in the corner, and it is after you cast a spell, summon a random minion of that cost, lose a durability. Very interesting card. 8 mana, a little high, considering the effect you immediately get isn't really going to happen. I mean, you could cast a 2 mana spell if you're on turn 10. You got to make it to turn 10 first in this day of aggro, but if you did and you cast that 2-mana spell, maybe you get something nice off of that. A 2-mana minion, though, however, is not that impactful. But if you played it with, say, a portal card the next turn, or the same turn if possible, if you played it with a portal card, then that's actually pretty good, because you would summon a minion of the value of the portal card, and you'd also summon a minion for the portal itself. So that's pretty solid. Next up we have the epic cards. Arcane Giant is first. Costs 1 less for each spell you've cast this game. Yeah, I mean, we have another giant card is basically what it comes down to. They all kind of act the same way. I think this card will definitely see play. Being at 12 mana, you have to kind of think about that. I mean, you're never really going to get him down to 0 mana. You could, but it would take a lot of time in the game, and these giant cards, because they're such huge hitters and they're just stats on the field, you want to play it as soon as possible, typically. Now, that wasn't always the idea with Molten Giant back when that was more viable, so it is okay to play the giants later in the game. And this guy here, you know, there's so many Yogg decks around, so many spells being cast. This whole expansion seems to be about spells. This adventure seems to be about spells. So I would say that Arcane Giant definitely has a place in this meta, and I think you will absolutely see him being played and constructed. And I guess you've got to even wonder what's going to come back into play. Could people play Big Game Hunter again because they're starting to worry about Arcane Giants and some of the other, you know, minions that are coming around? Bookworm. Nice pun there. If you're holding a dragon, destroy an enemy minion with 3 attack or less. Well, we've seen cards like this before. For 6 mana, this is pretty good. And we are all thinking Stampeding Kodo when we think of this card, but Stampeding Kodo is a 5 mana card. It only destroys up to 2 attack. This is a 6 mana card, destroys up to 3 attack, and 3 attack I think is significantly different, because with 3 attack you'll actually find strong monsters even that have 3 attack. It actually synergizes with Paladin even more. Stampeding Kodo, you would typically have to use Outdoor Peacekeeper. An Outdoor Peacekeeper would set the attack down to 1, and then you could Stampeding Kodo it. That was a great combo. But actually, Stampeding Kodo doesn't really fit into what Paladins want to play as much in terms of a card. Dragon Paladin decks, as I mentioned in the previous video, Dragon Paladin decks are pretty strong. And with this guy being a dragon, and you even being able to play Keeper of Oldemon and then play this guy, because that's exactly 10 mana, that'll really help you remove some kind of big threat that you don't want to waste an equality on. Avian Watcher. Not too excited about this card. If you control a secret, gain +1/+1 and taunt. I mean, yes, like I said, there's some secret support in this game, so you know, it's coming into play in the game more. It'll be a little more relevant. We'll see what the future brings, but even still, I don't really see this card being too strong. It's at 5 mana. Maybe if it was at 4 mana, that way every different class that has secrets is able to play a secret and then play this on the next turn. But instead, you know, at latest, you're a mage, you have a 3 mana secret, you play that, and then you play this 2 turns later. So, you know, sometimes the back-to-back turns is a strategy you want to go for. You could play this later game where you're able to play a secret and this all on 1 turn, but by then you could be dead, or, you know, it's just the secret's not as impactful. So, you know, this is an okay card if you can get a secret out very early and then play this on curve, but otherwise it seems a little lacking. Moat Lurker. Destroy a minion, death rattle, resummon it. Now, there's one weird mechanic I have a question about on this, which I don't know if I've seen addressed by a Blizzard employee. Well, I haven't seen it addressed yet at the time of making this video. It is, how does the resummon work? If I kill my opponent's minion, and then this guy dies, does it resummon that minion for my opponent? I would think that it would, but I'm not sure. Maybe it resummons it for you. It seems a little broken if it resummons it for you, but then again, those terrible, terrible stats might explain just that. But however, this kind of synergizes with the Priest card. 2 mana, silence one of your friendly minions. You can destroy an opponent's minion, and then you can silence this guy so that it will not resummon it for your opponent, assuming that it works that way. but that's an 8 mana combo. Does not seem worth it to me to have a 3/3 body that you own left over. I think the best way for this to be used, actually, is to play something like a Sylvanas on your side of the field, or a Cairn. Your opponent might ignore the Cairn, I don't know, but then you kill it with Moat Lurker. Maybe that's the best way for this to be used, but then again, I still don't know if that's totally worth it. This card is good for some kind of interesting removal. I absolutely believe we will see play from this, but exactly how it is used, and if you'd even run 2 copies of it, not too sure about, because the card itself is awful. The card by itself is terrible stats. You can just never play it. You'll just lose the game if you ever had to play this on turn 6. But we'll see. Pompous Thespian. A 3/2 with taunt. Yeah, this is just a straight power creep. It's just a straight power creep on the neutral 3/2 minion. It's a 3/2, not a very good taunt stat line. Ideally, you would want 2/3 if anything. It's really nothing to write home about. Maybe you'll pick it up in Arena. Zubat. Again, we're playing with the friendly Beast Dragon and Murloc theme. This is actually promoting that you run all 3, whereas before I was kind of saying that you would never run all 3, you would just simply run maybe one of each of them and pull them from your deck for free. But here it seems like Blizzard actually wants us to build a deck around all 3 archetypes, and I'm just not really seeing how that could ever be possible. It's just too many different directions you're pulling your deck. Maybe if you did a little mini combo of each, but then you would just never get the pieces together. I don't really see this being that great of a card. Maybe it's something interesting for Arena just because it does add a little buffing, and the stats in and of themselves are okay. Nether Spite Historian. If you're holding a dragon, discover a dragon. This card is amazing. I view this card as definitely one of the best dragon supports you could ask for. Has nice art. But yeah, I mean, what's not to love about a good Discover effect? Discover effects are extremely powerful. If you're a dragon deck, you're going to have a dragon in your opening hand, more than likely. You play this thing on turn 2, even coin it out on turn 1. It's a 1/3. It might help you take away some of the aggro if you're against an aggro opponent. If you're not against an aggro opponent, whatever. It's just a minion on the field. Excuse me. But this is a great card because you can discover a dragon and pick whatever you need. Do you have an early game dragon in your hand and you're afraid you're not going to get a later game? Do you have just nothing but late game dragons in your hand because they're, all the good dragons tend to be big, beefy, expensive cards, and you actually need like a 4-mana dragon like an Azure Drake. I mean, the fact that you can discover a dragon, I think this card will 100% see play in dragon decks. Arcane Anomaly. Whenever you cast a spell, give this minion +1 health. Wow, this card extremely interesting because there's so much spell casting going on. I mentioned a priest deck earlier, and I can actually see myself trying this card in that deck. I don't know if this deck is just going to, if this card is just going to feel too worthless in any spell-related deck, should you play it later in the game, but also you could play this in a druid deck with like token and druid and spells, and when you have all that kind of cards to pull from, you're seeing buffing, you're seeing just kind of the spamming of minions, and I think this guy could easily get his health up and his attack up even a little bit if you did it that way. If you did it with Priest or other spell-based decks, I think you're looking more for that early game. Play it on turn 1. If you go first, your opponent plays a 1-drop minion. Hopefully you can play out 2 spells. Maybe if you play it on turn 2, then you play this guy and you also coin, and then you play a 1-drop spell if you have that in your hand. And this guy's already at a 2/3, which is amazing for turn 1. If you can get this guy up to 2/3 on turn 1, then I think he'll be insane. So I think this guy will see play in some spell low and in the lower curve of the deck. I think he'll definitely see some play. Violet Illusionist. During your turn, your hero is immune. First of all, let's just point out the fact that this is a 4/3 for 3 mana. I think that's pretty good. I mean, we have multiple 4-mana cards that are 4/3s, and they've seen play in their time because they had great effects. Now, this card, is the effect great? somewhat debatable. Your hero has immune, but it's on your turn, of course. So if it was on your opponent's turn, that'd be interesting because it would force your opponent to trade into this, but then it might be a little broken if they can't clear it in, say, one turn. But having it on your turn is actually really interesting. I think what it does better than anything is it helps support just the classes that want to make it a little bit longer. If you're a druid and you play this card, if you're a rogue and you want to use your weapons, or if you're a warrior and you want to use your weapons. I mean, warriors don't have too much problem hitting their face, but no matter what, if you can attack into your opponent's monsters to make your trades a little more favorable, and then you can have this card down and not worry about the face damage you're going to be taking, I think that actually makes it kind of worth it. As a druid main myself, I think that there are multiple cards that I would put into my deck just to be able to combo with this. Some of the cards that buff, give you armor and damage. So yeah, I definitely see this being used. I think it's got pretty nice stats, and it has a pretty nice effect to help facilitate better early trading. Pantry Spider. Summon a 1/3 spider. Well, I think we can assume that that 1/3 spider is going to also be a beast. So that actually makes it a little interesting. But a 1/3 isn't really that strong, and a 1/3 for 3 mana also isn't that strong. Sure, you will get another one, but two 1/3s aren't that much better than one 1/3. I guess one thing you could be looking to do with this card is possibly give it Defender of Argus next turn if your opponent views it as a weak card and they just want to keep hitting your face, and then you give it Taunt, and then suddenly now you have two 4s and it can trade with your opponent's entire aggro board. So yeah, I see Pantry Spider as possibly playable in Druid, maybe in Hunter. And yeah, it's not an overall bad card. Not the best stats by itself, but if you've got any number of combo pieces, this is playable. Okay, Menagerie Magician. Give a random dragon. Give a random beast, dragon, and murloc +2/+2. So again, it is another one of those cards that are encouraging you to play all three archetypes. I can't really see this being as that good. Now, I'm almost wondering if maybe the intention here was just for it to be usable in all three archetypes, as opposed to trying to play them together, just to give each of those archetypes additional support. But I think then what you run into the problem of is that this card might be a little bit better statted than a previous one, but this card is a 4/4. So it's really not that great on turn 5. I don't really want to play a card on turn 5 just to give another minion +2/+2 at random and have a 4/4. A 4/4 isn't really that great. One thing is to be noted, I guess, about all of these kind of cards is that if you do just focus on one archetype perhaps, and then you include one card from a different archetype. If I'm a beast druid, but then I have like 1 or 2 dragons for late game, this might actually be really powerful. Not the buffing one, but maybe maybe the other one that helps the legendary, that helps you summon them. That one might be a little better. This card, I don't really see it having too much play, but again, it's a common, and that means it's viable for Arena. And yeah, with the influx of beasts and dragons, I think this is a pretty good card for Arena. Runic Egg. Draw a card. It is a 1 mana 0/2. Draw a card. It's interesting because we have a 1 mana draw a card again. I don't know that I really see this seeing too much play, but I think there's some potential here if you can buff it with any number of things that would give it Taunt. Or if you can play it in some sort of an aggro deck or an early game survive deck, and you simply give it attack, and you let it attack into something of your opponent's. Maybe you'd even get 2 trades off of it if the opponent's monster only has 1 attack itself, but most likely you'll just go even, but then you'll also draw a card. It just kind of gives you something to do on turn 1 if, for the deck you're designing, you don't like the other turn 1 options. So I see this overall as not a bad card, but it's going to require a certain kind of deck to really utilize it. And lastly, we have Arcanosmith. 4 mana, 3/2, stats, a little underwhelming, but you do summon an 0/5 with taunt. Now, kind of like the previous card I just mentioned, the 0 attack power is not that great. It's a little lackluster, but this kind of just gives you that little umph of survivability you might need to make it through turn 4 possibly. If you go first and you play this on turn 4, your opponent hits their turn 4 and they're aggro, then they might just hit a little bit of a wall, and I mean essentially it healed you for 5, I suppose. And then you can use this minion that's on the board still, the 3/2, and you can trade with one of your opponent's monsters, even an unfavorable one if you want to. You could kill off his knife juggler, and then, you know, go from there. I mean, it has possibilities. I think this definitely has a lot of value in Arena. You summon an extra monster, that's pretty amazing. So it has a lot of value in Arena. Constructed, I think it might see some play. And with that, that is all the cards for One Night in Karazhan. This has been my review of the adventure, so I will be playing cards. I'll be playing through the adventure once it's out. I'll be playing these cards in decks, and join me for all of that. Thank you. It's just a phase.